Hello, Megan Thompson with Megan Thompson Coaching. Today we are going to talk all about the 3 things that you need to take control over when your child is out of control in the school setting. Now, when you're parenting a highly sensitive child, if your child's behavior has you wondering when they'll get kicked out or they've just been kicked out of school, let's make sure that you are tuned in, because this topic, while unfortunate, is definitely one we hear from parents about often. So we're going to cover this today. So here at MTC, we know how to help parents break out of the pattern of the daily meltdown cycle. We have helped hundreds of families all around the world stop those daily meltdowns. And this is for children who are hitting, kicking, screaming, shutting down, running away, outright refusing, and engaging in pretty intense behaviors on a daily basis, multiple times a day, or at the very least multiple times a week. So if your child is demonstrating these major behaviors on a regular basis, and that's what I mean by regular, daily, multiple times a week, multiple times a day, then make sure that you're staying tuned. This is relevant for parents ages 3 through 18 when we think about major behaviors like this, specifically related to worried about whether or not your kid could be kicked out of school. Now, that doesn't mean that parents of 2-year-olds don't worry if their kid's going to be kicked out of preschool or daycare or whatever setting you have. But what we're going to talk a lot about today is noticing how to support your child in breaking out of this pattern and doing it from a place where you feel powerful rather than reactive. This is something that you as a parent need to be able to have a pretty specific plan in place to take over, because your child is out of control. And I want to speak about this from a place of noticing that we're not here to judge and not here to say that your child's out of control in the sense that you need to control your kid. Using that statement because your child feels out of control in their emotions. And that is number one. The first thing that you need to notice and make a decision on is to get clarity on the fact that your child is not making willful choices to explode in the school setting. Now, this is critically important, especially if your kid's school does not follow that same belief. If your child's school follows more of a traditional perspective that children are to be seen and not heard, that the school setting is where children sit and learn and listen, then this can be really, really difficult for parents and for your child, who's also highly sensitive, to tolerate all day long without needing to move their bodies, without needing to learn through play, without needing to learn through verbal or physical exploration. And for a child who's struggling with daily emotions that are big to the point where they feel out of control, and as a result their bodies and behaviors become out of control, this is extremely overwhelming and extremely stressful. So it's really important that you understand that your child's not making a choice that is conscious here in this experience. Their behavior is telling you that they are overwhelmed. And this first piece can be really tricky to decide upon as a parent, because you could hear from all kinds of people telling you, you just need to control your kid. You just need to tell your kid that they'll get kicked out of school if they don't handle themselves. And I've got to tell you, we've helped parents whose children have been asked to leave multiple school settings. That does not work. And as much as that is obviously unfortunate for the child as well as for you as a parent, threats don't teach children no matter what setting you're in. And hopefully you've heard me say this before, but if this is the first show that you're tuning into, we're going to talk a little bit about how children learn and understand what drives children's behavior. And out of control behavior is driven by out of control hearts, emotions the emotional experience of your child feels like they can't manage those big emotions, and as a result, it comes out in their bodies. Now, that might also look like a complete shutdown for you. And so if your child is not engaging in the school setting, say, for example, you know your child is gifted, they might have some pretty significant academic strengths, but they're not doing their homework, and that might jeopardize their placement. This is also relevant here too. So make sure that you're continuing to listen in, even if your child is not aggressive in the classroom setting. Now, obviously, safety is another concern, right? The school is going to make sure that they need to maintain the physical safety of all of their students. And if your child is the student who is hurting other kids, it makes sense that the school would be alarmed by that, right? That they would need to take action and take immediate action. With that being said, removing your child from the classroom, removing your child from the circumstances, and God forbid, removing them from the whole school setting altogether isn't going to teach your child what to do differently. So this goes back to what we've said before over and over again, which is that punishment doesn't teach. Children, especially highly sensitive children, need to know what to do, and punishment only teaches them what not to do. And highly sensitive kids who are already anxious and worried and fearful in their bodies, and that's what's so overwhelming for them, already worry about the worst case scenario and likely jump to the worst case scenario conclusions very often in their minds, so much so that you as a parent are spending a lot of your time reassuring your kid that that they need to slow down, that it's going to be okay, that worst case scenario isn't plausible or likely, right? But none of that actually matters because it doesn't help your child slow down. It doesn't help your child maintain their behavior. And if fear taught anything, then we would see a heck of a lot less people responding ineffectively, I should say, when they're yelled at, right? But what we know for sure is that when your child is struggling, we can't use fear, like threats of needing to remove them from the classroom or removing them from the setting at home, like in a timeout setting, etc. None of that teaches your kid what to do, and your child can't learn if they're out of the situation they need to be learning in. So we need to understand how children learn as point number 2. The other component that you need to have clarity on for you as a parent is understanding how you are responding in this moment. Obviously, if the school is taking this concern seriously, as it's highly likely they would, it's very important that you understand how to advocate for your sensitive child. And that's what we're going to be spending the majority of our time focused on today is understanding what needs to be prioritized when your child is on the verge of losing their school placement, or you are noticing that your child is not being served effectively in the education setting that they're in. And this is really takes quite a long set of a time to understand the nature of the highly sensitive trait. And so when we work with clients directly on supporting their kids and staying in the school settings, or in parents actively deciding to help the school shift the environment so that the child can stay in the environment that they're assigned, or in other situations deciding to move schools with their kids proactively because they know that this isn't the best setting, one of the things that you need to truly understand is how your child fits the criteria of the highly sensitive personality trait. And you need to be able to advocate in a way that those 4 components are seen as strengths, because when we think about understanding the fact that your child is highly sensitive, the average educational layperson or educational professional isn't going to understand how being highly sensitive is different from having a mental health need, or being relevant to other personalities that are neurodiversity concerns or neurodiversity presentations. that include sensitivity, like sensory processing disorder or autism, for examples. And so it's very important that you educate yourself on the personality trait, that you find how your child fits those 4 components, and that you learn not only that, but also how to support your child in understanding that how they fit it, so that they can own it as well and not see it as a weakness. Highly sensitive kids already observe that they respond to the world differently than other children, and this can be a pretty significant burden for kids who need to take extra support from the school settings, because we can see highly sensitive kids who struggle with receiving that advocacy that parents put in place because they don't want to be seen as different. So you need to be able to not only advocate with the school, but also advocate with your child, and then teach your child how to advocate for their own needs. And all of this requires you to notice that the behaviors that you're seeing are just a symptom of the meltdown cycle. Where the meltdowns are happening is only one part of the puzzle to address when we're talking about breaking out of the meltdown cycle for good. So sure, you could change the kid's teacher, you could change the kid's classroom setting, you could add a comfy pillow and some, headphones that your child could go to, or a wobble chair, or anything else that you might find in an example of how to keep a busy body occupied while learning. But none of those things are going to break down the pattern that you're seeing. All you're going to be able to do is show your child that there's some tools there. But if your child's not taking action on those tools, and the school doesn't understand when and how those tools can be used, then you're still back at square one with the whack-a-mole experience of just throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. So I'm adding metaphors to each other here, but hopefully you understand what I'm talking about here. Now, one thing that's really important to make sure that we speak about here in advocating for your child is in noticing that children don't, like I said before, they don't learn through punishment, but that doesn't mean that children don't understand that their behavior is ineffective. Your sensitive child wasn't put on this earth to be miserable, and they know that. But what's tricky for them at this point is that they don't know how to stay out of that misery in a skillful way. And so those big emotions, when lectured or chastised, start to learn to stuff themselves. Your highly sensitive child can learn to pretend that everything's okay, nod, smile, recite what their quote-unquote good behavior is supposed to look like, and then as a result take in the fact that they are a bad kid. And that's the message that they hear from parents and school teachers or school professionals who speak a lot about what they're not supposed to be doing, and then share with the child that they should know better and all of that. This kind of communication style from either a parenting perspective or an educational perspective in terms of behavior modification just simply isn't effective. Children learn much more effectively through play, and lectures and play don't go hand in hand. We need to be able to communicate in a way that doesn't include shaming your child, and punishment shows not only your child what not to do, and like I mentioned before, it doesn't teach them what to do, but it also induces shame. And so when we think about the traditional perspective of removing your child from the situation, threatening them with the consequences of their actions, to use any sort of carrot and stick mentality to drive behavior, none of that takes into account the fact that your child's emotions being out of control are what creates your child's reactions. And so when you teach your child how to manage their own emotions and how to regulate themselves and use skills in the moment, then your child feels capable of using those skills. Now, when I think about how parents are typically doing this, usually it's in trying to teach your child during the meltdown, or in trying to remind your child and quiz them about what they're supposed to do. And that's the same lecture mentality that is really invalidating for your sensitive kid. They start to, and they continue to believe that this is just too hard to do, and as a result, they don't take action on what you're teaching them. So when we think about being able to advocate, you need to be able to understand the personality trait, but also how that and how symptoms of the meltdown cycle can inhibit your child from experiencing their personality trait as a strength. So obviously, if you're detail oriented, one would assume when you're in your skillful mind that you can notice all kinds of options to solve your problems. That's what creative problem solving is all about, right? And detail-oriented people can think outside the box when they are calm and when they are curious. And children who are calm and curious can come up with wonderful ways to solve their own problems. But what's most important to understand is when they are feeling anxiety, frustration, fear, overwhelm, intensity, it's extremely difficult for your child to be curious at that point. And that makes it extremely hard for them to use a skill that they learned when they were feeling curious. And so when we think about being able to teach your child, it's really important for you to notice how children learn and then educate the educators around how children learn, which can feel really, really hard if you don't have the science to back it up or the system in terms of being able to advocate and seeing it work in your own household. Because teaching teachers how kids learn can feel tricky, right? And so I can speak from experience. Over 70% of the families that we work with, at least one parent in that pair, if we work with two parents, in a two-parent household or what have you, or a co-parenting relationship, at least one of them is in the child development or helping fields. That means doctors, nurses, veterinarians, and therapists, as well as educators, professors, early childhood educators, teachers, high school teachers, etc. And many of the teachers that we work with understand that children need to be supported individually, but their educational systems that they work in don't understand how children actually absorb material and how that material can be taught only when a child is calm and playful and curious. And so when we think about that missing link that is often, the link between emotions, behavior, and education, and it's not often taught in the curriculums that the higher ups and the bureaucracies of the school systems choose, because that doesn't get you the numbers you need to see on those standardized tests. And so when we think about, because that pace, I should say, and prioritizing those. And so it's really quite difficult for educators to be able to implement this without a clear strategy. So they might understand, right? Teachers go into teaching to help children. So they might understand that, when you're communicating with children, that you need to speak differently than when you're communicating with adults. But behavior modification is not covered in the master's degree for a teaching degree. And professional development plans and professional development CEUs, etc., are often not focused on behavior modification, and many teachers are not supported in learning about behavior modification. And with that being said, most behavior modification plans that are touted by non-experts in this field focus on rewards and punishments. And so, like I mentioned before, even if a teacher is getting any learning on emotional behavior management, a lot of the time it's focused on using sticker charts, scorecards, rainbow levels, whatever it is, the flavor of the week, and none of that actually works to help children manage their emotions, because children are internally motivated. So we can't use external motivators like stickers and prizes and clips and any other public display of how you're doing as a motivator to achieve, without adding the expectation that children are competitive, that children are by nature that are motivated by something outside of themselves. Children who feel well do well. And this was really important to understand as a parent, because when you're supporting your child in feeling good about themselves and feeling capable, then they will be able to display that capable behavior in all avenues of their life. But when you're motivating your child based on something they're supposed to achieve, or a prize that they're supposed to get, or a thing that they're not going to get if they quote unquote behave, like a suspension or being kicked out, etc., then this obviously it puts the power outside of your child, which sends the direct message to your kid that they aren't capable unless they have an adult helping them modulate their behavior, right? Regulate their behavior. But what happens when we ask our kid to control themselves? We're not the ones holding their hands to themselves. We ask our kids to keep their own hands to themselves, right? So in this example, when you're using something outside of your child, like a consequence or a punishment or a threat to control your kid's behavior, and then you tell your kid to control themselves, you're sending completely contradictory messages to your child. And so as a result, whether you're doing this or the educational system your child is in is doing this, it's incredibly important for you as a parent to understand that both of those approaches are really going to be quite counterproductive to each other, right? So when we think about understanding how children learn, and we need to understand that children do need consequences for their actions, but that cannot be the motivator for change. When we teach the concept of cause and effect, we have to understand and remember that the child's brain development is, children already are learning cause and effect, but not to the point where that cause and effect inhibits their behavior. Okay, kids love science experiments, right? Children learn at a very early age. When I push my body up, I get to see more. When I stand up tall, I get to see more and reach more. When I take steps, I get to walk to my loved ones and get hugs. When I reach out and I say, I get what I need, right? That's cause and effect. So your child is learning the concepts of cause and effect because that's what helps them maintain safety in a relationship. But cause and effect does not inhibit their behavior. The understanding of cause and effect is a biological process and a relationship process, but it is not something that drives your child's behavior, because that requires their brain to be more developed than it actually is. That process in the brain is designed and developed in the frontal lobe. This is the front of the brain that is not fully developed until your child is 25. So when you ask your 6-year-old or your 8-year-old or your 10-year-old or your 14-year-old to notice that if they don't do their work, or if they hit other kids, or if they explode and toss the furniture, that they will be kicked out of school, in the moment of that level of overwhelm, their brain is not calling forth visions of the future. Their brain is calling forth fear, terror, intensity, overwhelm. And that's what's leading to that big explosive behavior. And so if we look at it from this lens, which is the truth, not theory, then we can understand that it's very easy to discount any traditional perspective that didn't take science into account, that the cause and effect drives behavior. So it's important for us to get some pretty clear understanding of this. So and this has been backed up in the understanding of the human brain for decades at this point. When we think about how highly sensitive people think and how highly sensitive people feel, and that emotion is more intense, that emotion of terror, fear, etc., is more intense than the average person. The average non-highly sensitive person, I should say, which, being 20% of the population highly sensitive, means that you're not the average person. You are more of a minority. Then it's important for you as a parent, especially if you're not highly sensitive yourself, to have clarity on how big those emotions are for your sensitive kiddo. Okay, so the understanding that your child already knows that hitting is bad will help you as you advocate with the school, and when or advocate with your child to advocate with the school. And this is important. We think about the strategy that is necessary to break out of this pattern. There's 4 components that are something that you can take action on your own, but there's 5 parts to the strategy of breaking out of the meltdown cycle. When we think about being able to break out of this, you yourself need to take a clear picture of how you see your child as capable or incapable, and what that does for you to inhibit or inflame their behaviors, depending on your approach as a parent. And that strategy that you're using to put your kid in a perspective that in your own perspective of what they're capable of, keeps your child stuck. And especially if you're frustrated frequently, which obviously one wouldn't blame you for, right? There's no judgment in noticing that if your kiddo is struggling at this level, that you would be frustrated. And with that being said, it can be very easy to feel helpless at that extent on what your kid will do to shift their behavior, what your kid's capable of in shifting their behavior. So it's important that you take a pretty clear look at that, and then start to shift the way that you respond to your child. And that has to be done in a playful way, okay? Right? And it has to be done in a way that supports your kid in eliminating a shame response, which, like I said, can't be driven from threats of punishment. And all of this requires you to be able to really get out of the feedback loop that you've been giving your child, which is a lecture or a continued conversation or a continued review that their behavior is unacceptable, that their behavior is not helping them, etc. Your kid already knows that. What they need to know and learn is how to break out of that pattern. And quite frankly, if you've been struggling with this for quite some time, so much so that your child is on the verge of being kicked out, it's time to engage professional support. And then that's step number 5. You need to be able to have a conversation with an expert who's helped hundreds of people break out of this pattern, not just, the occasional sensitive kid, and they've heard of the personality trait. Being highly sensitive, while 1 out of every 5 is highly sensitive, is completely different than being highly sensitive and stuck in the meltdown cycle. These are 2 different, very significant things. A subset of a subset, if you will. And you need to be able to trust an expert who has helped multiple children in all kinds of situations break out of that pattern, and multiple isn't 5. When we see families who have broken out of this pattern in all kinds of school settings all around the world, then you can start to understand that there really are some pretty core principles that need to be addressed in a targeted fashion. There are patterns that you're going to be able to observe when you start to look at data sizes that large. You start to support that many people. It's really quite easy to make it simplified at that point. Because when a professional has only seen 5 families with this circumstance, then they look at it as every family is unique and different, and it's very difficult for a professional with that level of inexperience to consider situations and patterns, because 5 is not an appropriate scientific data set. But once you get to the point where you've served hundreds of families, like our team has, we've got this down to a science. We can understand for you how to tweak to your unique child, right? This isn't, we're not talking about rubber stamping it. We're talking about working with human behavior here, and the fact that your child is a unique kid, and the behavior pattern isn't unique to our team. And that's important. So we encourage you to book a call. Have a conversation with experts who know how to break out of this pattern and determine whether or not the strategy that I've outlaid for you today is even relevant for your particularly unique family. Because I can speak till I'm blue in the face about what works for our clients, but if your family has some anomaly situations going on, or some other reasons why your child could be struggling that you didn't perhaps notice or pick up on, or some other factors on your end as a parent that need to be taken care of before we would be a good fit, that would be something that we would have to take a look at one-on-one. And that's something that we do, and we're happy to do it. We've helped hundreds of families. We've taken thousands of phone calls, and that's okay. That's not something that we are going to stop doing. There's no other efficient way to solve this problem than to have a conversation with every single family that we invite to work with us, and so that we know that if we're inviting you, we're sure that we can help you. And that means that many of the families that we speak with aren't invited or aren't a fit for what we do. And that's fine. What we want to be able to do is share with you what's going to work for your particular family. And that's an honor for us to be able to do that and share with you and point you in the right direction if what we do isn't the appropriate fit. Now, if it is, we'll walk you through where you're stuck, what you're struggling with, how significant the issue is for your particular family, and whether or not your goals are in alignment with what we do, right? If your goal is to tell your kid to just keep their ish together and get them to just fall in line and respond like with respect to the teachers in a way that demonstrates to them that they don't have a voice, that's not going to be something that we would agree would be necessary for your sensitive kid, for children in general, right? We want children to learn to advocate for their needs in a safe, fair, and effective way. And what I mean by that is to learn collaboration, not negotiation. And that's important to understand. And so, if being able to teach your kiddo those skills is relevant to what you want, as well as other dreams for your family. And we have helped families do that before, and we know we can help your family. We'll tell you exactly how that works. And you can get started right away, because why wait, right? Especially if you're at this level of intensity. And we've seen many families notice that that it's important to take action early, because children are learning. They're learning how to operate in the world, how to identify with their own emotions and who they are as people. That identity that your child is building is solidified around age 7. And then it's much harder to break out of those patterns without shifting and even further getting important understandings with your child on how they conceptualize themselves, how they think about themselves, and as they age. So it's not to say that we haven't helped families in this situation whose kids are 8, 9, 10, 14, etc. 16, 17, etc. But it's important for you to notice that if your child is 6, the simple answer might be, oh, let's just switch the school, we'll be good to go. But that's the wrong way to look at it. There's no quick fix when your child's gotten to the point where their behavior is so extreme that adults don't think that they can help them. Obviously, there's a bigger issue here that we want to observe, whether or not what we do is going to help you. And we're happy to support you in doing that and to take action immediately on it. So how do you do that? You go to meganthompsoncoaching.com/talk, or if you're parenting a teen, high school age or up, go to meganthompsoncoaching.com/teen talk, TEEN talk. And then we will have a conversation with everybody involved and support you in making sure that you're in the right place and you can get on the right track as soon as possible. All right. Thank you